Welcome to the YJB Girls Working Group. This group is designed to hear from professionals within youth justice on the work they're doing with girls in the youth justice system and an opportunity to share best practice with the sector.
We've got three people that will talk to us today. We're going to start with Tian from Coventry, who's going to be talking about Coventry's approach to working with girls. And then in a change to the advertised programme, we've got Hannah Smith from Cardiff, who's coming along and talking about what they do with the girls in Cardiff. And then we'll be having a presentation from Gilly Sharpe, who's been doing some work in terms of women and girls in conflict with the law, and she is from the University of Sheffield, and she'll be doing a presentation on some of the research that she's been doing with girls in conflict with the law. So fairly packed schedule today, but I want to make sure we give time for a round table at the end for hints and tips and anything people want to share about best practice of working in girls. And then before we close, I would like to invite someone to volunteer to do a session at the next forum that we'll be holding, which will probably be in a quarter's time, which will take us just around Christmas time. Whether that's before or after, we'll look at people's diaries. So hopefully that works for everybody. Is that what people were hoping, expecting today? Those of you on cameras, not brilliant. So Tian, I see you're here. Fantastic. So I'm handing over to you to start the session today.
Thank you. And also my manager, Abby, as well, is here as well, who's going to co-deliver with me.
Thank you, Abby.
Good morning, everybody. We're here today just to talk to you about the work that we've tried to do with girls in Coventry and the journey that we've been on to get to where we are. So we'll start by introducing ourselves.
So I'm Tian Martins and I am the Development Engagement Officer at Coventry Youth Justice. So it was a new role in May 22, and the idea was for me to be bridging a gap really between young people's voices and what's happening at board meetings, and making sure that the service is as child first as possible. Yeah, so that's me, Abby.
And I'm Abby Jones. I'm one of the team managers in Coventry Youth Justice, and I've got the thematic lead for disproportionality, which includes a lot of work, but it includes working with girls, working with underrepresented groups, which girls have always been in our service. The reason that we started to have a focus on working with girls is girls have always been around 8 or 9% of our total caseload. But at the beginning of last year, we started to see this grow. And ever since, they've been hovering around 12 or 13%. So only a small increase. But because we've always had such low numbers of girls, we thought we're seeing this as a theme. So actually, whilst it's a small increase, that's important and we need to be responding to it. So we were thinking about what do we need to do, even though we're only seeing a small increase. That says that something is changing in terms of more girls becoming involved in criminality or higher detection of girls involved in criminality. What do we need to do because we're seeing this trend? So we decided that we probably needed a one-to-one intervention based on what we already know about working with girls, which I'll tell you about in the next slide. But we also had an aspiration to create a space for girls, a safe space where they could come together and talk about what's important to them and give us an opportunity to sort of introduce services that they could get in touch with. So this all started when I first joined Coventry Youth Justice in 2020. I joined the Regional Girls Working Group, which was chaired by the service manager of Sandwell at the time, and Val from Birmingham was part of that, and I know that she's just joined. One of the things that we wanted to do was to think about an absolute baseline. If a caseworker gets allocated a girl and they're having a bit of a panic, because we know most people are used to working with boys and all of our research base is pretty much around boys, what do we want people to know? So Val and I got tasked with getting together and we created a top tips for working with girls. So because Birmingham is such a big area, they've got really large numbers of girls. So they've got a girl specific unit, which it sounds like you'll know about from Val's presentation at the last forum. So Val and I were able to get together and we created a top tips for working with girls document. It's 2 sides of A4, and the idea is that it's a reference document that you can just go to that gives you some ideas about how do you create a space, how do you start those conversations, what's different about working with girls, what do you need to think about differently. So that document is available on the Youth Justice Resource Hub, and because I would imagine that the slides are being sent out, I've put a link to it there. So if anybody wants to go in and have a look at it, you can either Google it or you can click on the link. So that's where we started thinking about, we need to do something differently. What does that need to look like with girls? So T, I'll hand over to you to talk everybody through our one-to-one intervention.
Yes, so on the back of what Abby was saying, with the increase of girls coming through to the service, we identified actually there was probably a gap. A lot of our interventions are tailored towards the boys that we work with. So myself and 2 other colleagues, who we've all got quite a lot of knowledge around working with girls from previous roles that we've been in. We came together and created an 8-week intervention specifically for girls. So this was to start some of those conversations and create a safe space for girls, or look at things such as gang-related issues, but with the slant of it being from a girl's perspective. So all of our staff have knowledge of this. So we did some workshops around training the staff of how to deliver this workshop, and it is delivered by the case managers themselves. So we rarely have girls working with male case managers, but if that was the case at any point, then somebody like myself would step in to deliver those sessions with the girls. But all case managers are skilled to be able to do this, and we expect that all girls coming through to the service would have some of these sessions. So it might be that a case manager identifies, I've got a girl on the caseload, they'd have a consultation with myself or one of the other members that created this intervention. We'd then look at that young person and see, okay, we think that 3 sessions would be appropriate for that young person, or whether it would be all 8 if they're on a slightly longer order. And the idea of the sessions, or the interventions, to improve emotional well-being, understand feelings and emotions, feeling safer, feeling more empowered, recognising different types of behaviour, such as abusive behaviours or healthy relationships, and identifying where to get support. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, it's broken down into 8 sessions, and sorry, I just heard. Yes, it's broken down into 8 sessions. So the first one is Inside Out. So this is all about feelings and emotions, understanding what is meant by feelings and emotions, identifying different feelings and emotions, and being able to kind of map out how that feels in their body, healthy ways and unhealthy ways of dealing with these emotions, and also coping strategies. We've then got My Brain. This was created by a psychology student. Is that correct, Abby? Psychology student. So it's got all the right facts and everything in there. But this is where exploring the term of trauma, and identifying what trauma with a big T looks like, what trauma with a little t looks like, the 6 responses to threat, examples of why and when young people may respond in these ways, how trauma can impact our typical threat response, and also window of tolerance. So then we've got session 3, which is What She Wants, and this is around exploring healthy relationships, abusive relationships, what the difference as well is between abusive behaviour within a relationship versus healthy challenge, healthy arguments, healthy distance, or space. We also look at consent, and also where to find help more specifically in relation to relationships, abusive relationships, things like that. We got session 4, which is Wiser. So this is more around the grooming process, what it is, how it takes place, where it takes place, the fact that online grooming has become a lot more common, and can happen a lot faster than the traditional, you know, face-to-face ways of grooming. Exploring indicators of grooming, exploring child sexual exploitation, child criminal exploitation, trafficking. There's a little section in there around the invisibility of girls, and also how this can happen to anybody. So we've got a clip in there with the Georgia Steele. I don't know if, I'm sure some people might be aware that, I think it's called the football fraudster. So how Georgia Steele, who's a Love Island celebrity, she was groomed and tricked by her partner. So just shows how relatable it is to anybody, really. We've then got a session called Judged. This one is quite a heavy session, and it may only be appropriate for certain young people, or, you know, you have to use your own judgment of how deep you go with this session. But it's introducing the normalisation of abuse in society. So we look at unwritten rules, introduction to feminism, misogyny, sexism, some of those kind of terms that it might be the first time they're hearing it, or they've heard it before, but they don't really know what it is. Looking at victim blaming and identifying examples of victim blaming and victim blaming language, sex porn in the media, and how and what influences their view of sex, what is healthy sex, and again using celebrities such as Kim Kardashian and Black China to have these discussions. So it could be that, like, OnlyFans is now an influence, or celebrities are an influence, pornography is an influence. And then finishing this session up with body image, but linking it back to all of the conversation throughout the session. So back to social pressure, self-blame, the expectation of girls, the influence of media, things like that. Session 6 is called Connected, and this is all about understanding your intuition and gut feelings. We all have a right to feel safe all of the time, but as we know, for people who have experienced abuse or been subjected to, you know, trauma, sometimes intuition and gut feelings can be blurred, and it's hard to pick up. I know even for myself, sometimes you can't really, is this my gut feeling, or is this, you know, me overthinking things? So exploring that, really. Also some guided meditation, some body mapping, protective interruption and early warning signs, exploring secrets, surprises and privacy, happy place visualization. And we also offer in this session to do some work with crystals, and if the young person, you know, wants to take that offer, then they get to keep the crystal that they choose and take it home and continue with some of that work. Session 7 is called Reach Out. So this is more around sources of support, identifying sources of support, but looking at what good support looks like versus maybe what some unhelpful support looks like, and breaking down what the different types of support is. So emotional, practical, informational, and evaluation. And then the final session is called Her Story, and this is exploring self-esteem, self-love, identifying positive attributes of other people, identifying positive attributes of the self, affirmations, and then you end with a letter to yourself to kind of focus on, you know, leaving the past in the past and moving forward in a positive way for yourself. So that is the 8 sessions. We created the intervention over the past, I'd say, about 9 months. So it's only now where it's really been implemented. So we've had quite a few girls taking part, but we're just trying to now push to get a bit of feedback around that. But some of the feedback that we've had so far is, at the end, girls saying, I feel safer, I feel more confident in myself, I am making better choices, and I am kinder to myself. But as I've just said, we need to do a little bit more work around getting some more feedback from young people. Thanks, Abby.
Brilliant. Thank you, T. So that's the one-to-one intervention that we've developed and we're delivering to girls. But we started having a think to ourselves, what else can we do to get sort of peer conversations going? We know that we're seeing more girls coming in. We know from our one-to-one intervention that girls are really responding well to talking about the why and themselves and their emotions and their feelings. So how can we sort of capitalise on what we've learned and try and bring girls together? We've got a boys group that runs, and T leads on that, and that's absolutely brilliant, and the feedback is amazing. And we thought, okay, so we need to do the same for girls. So we piloted it first a few months ago, and we did one session per month. The feedback from the girls was it's too far apart. That's not working for us. So we thought, OK, over the summer holidays, we're going to identify a week and we're going to have 4 days back to back. So the girls group was born in a new way, learning from what we got wrong the last time. So we co-delivered this with a local charity called the Coventry Boys and Girls Club. So we were using their premises because they've got a really nice sort of office space. Well, it's not really an office space, but like a venue that we can use. And we were there with them. And we also invited community partners. So we had other partners there every day. So we had Kairos Women Working Together, who are a Coventry-based charity supporting women and girls who are experiencing abuse in relationships. We have Positive Choices, who are our local service for girls experiencing substance misuse, but they also do a lot of work around healthy relationships and things like that. And we also had colleagues from Creative Optimistic Visions, who are a mentoring service, and they sent one of their mentors along to try and get the girls thinking about what's the benefits of mentoring, because we're very aware we only work with most children for quite a short period of time, and in terms of exit planning, contingency planning, they're still going to need somebody on their side. So what can we do to build these relationships so that our girls have got longer term support? So it was a 4-day group, and we themed each session. So we tried to go with what we know from our girls that they're interested in. So all of the key topics that you'd expect: nails, music. We had a business session in there just to mix things up a little bit and see how they responded to that. And then the last day was designed as like a bit of a spa day to sort of reflect on what we'd done throughout the week. So the idea was that we had somebody who was a specialist in every session. So we had somebody teaching the girls how to do nails. We had a business mentor. They wrote their own song on music day. But in the background, we're trying to have all of these conversations around what does it feel like to be a girl in today's society? What are the barriers? What are the pressures? How are we coping with them? Who's got a really good way of coping with them? What can you share with the others? If you're struggling with something and you want to ask for advice, trying to create a safe space to do that. So just, although the days are themed, actually they're almost a bit of a front for us to have these conversations, because that's the important thing throughout the programme. We made sure that we provided food and drinks, always a good buy-in for the girls, but also, cost of living crisis. Also, Coventry is really high on the poverty and deprivation indices of the United Kingdom. And we know that children can suffer more during school holidays when they don't get enough to eat. So we wanted to make sure that we had food and drinks throughout the day. Tian created some beautiful certificates for the girls, so that they had something physical that they could go away with to say, I've been a part of this. And for a lot of girls, we know that, well, for a lot of children, actually, we know that summer holidays can feel a little bit aimless, lots of spare time, lots of opportunity to get into trouble, even for young people who don't usually get into trouble. So it's about sort of promoting that positive activity. And introducing them to the Boys and Girls Club, who do quite a lot of positive activity. They do a lot of school holiday and half-term activities, but they also do their own mentoring. They do boxing, they do music, they do all sorts of things. So just an opportunity to bring everybody into a really safe space where we can talk to girls about what's going on and help them to think about other opportunities that they can get involved with in their local community. And Tiana's put together some lovely pictures of our girls group, so you can see the room that we used, and our colleagues in the Boys and Girls Club made it look like a spa day. You can see some of the food that we offered, one of the girls having their nails done, one of the girls having their hair done, and then we had someone in doing henna, so it was a nice opportunity to learn about each other's culture as well. And then you won't be able to read this now, but you might be able to see it when the slides come out. We had a window and markers so girls could write down their thoughts and how they were feeling on the last day. So where do we go next? So Tian and a couple of our case manager colleagues are doing an evaluation of the You Meet Us one-to-one programme. T and our two case managers led on the programme and developed it. So they're the ones to collect the feedback, to reflect, evaluate, understand what's going well, think about what needs to be done differently. Are there any new themes that we're seeing that need to be incorporated into sessions? So we're trying really hard not to have this as a static intervention, something that keeps growing as we learn from our girls. We have a meeting tomorrow, I think, in fact, to liaise with the partners that we co-delivered the girls group with, to get the girls' feedback, because they collected that. And again, think about what went well, because we learned so much from the feedback the first time. What do we need to learn? How can we keep this group evolving? How can we keep it current and relevant? And how can we keep it a group that girls want to attend, want to come to, and feel glad that they came to? We're also keeping an eye on our data, so we're trying to be very aware of trends. As the lead for disproportionality, I'm really conscious of who we've got coming through, gender, age, race, etc. We recognise did a Black and mixed heritage boys group, which is the group Tian's leading on. So something I think that we need to explore if our number of girls remains a little bit higher or continues to increase is, do we need a group that's specifically for non-white girls? We noted that one of the girls, a Black girl that came to the group, was really curious about who would be there. And she was asking if she would be the only Black girl, what would the makeup of the group look like? Which started us thinking, actually, do we need a safe space specifically for non-white girls? So we're interested to get her feedback now the group has concluded, to see what she thought. So that's on our agenda as well. I've already talked about the fourth point, getting ahead of myself. So this is where we're hoping to go with our girls' journey, whilst keeping everything that we've already developed. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of our journey with girls in Coventry. So I've put our email address here. So if anybody wants to ask us any questions or reach out, we're not precious about anything we've developed. So if there's anything that you want that we can share with you to support you in working with girls in your area, then please ask. We're an open book and happy to help in any way we can to get the best offer for girls all over the country.
Thank you so much, Tian and Abby. Really interesting stuff. I'm not going to ask anything because I imagine there's going to be a load of questions coming from the people on the forum. So I'll open it up for any questions to Tian and Abby. And I haven't confirmed yet, but I'm sure Tian and Abby will be sending me the slide pack for me to send out to everybody in due course. So any questions for Coventry?
I've got
Hi.
one.
Oh, sorry.
Right,
Sorry, you
there
go
was a
first,
pause and
Valerie.
I was just thinking, really, none? And then
Yeah.
the hands come up. So go first, Stephen. I don't sorry, I don't know, because it's so first question can go ahead with the first person that started speaking, and then I'll go to Valerie and Harley after that.
Sorry, I was going to ask, how did you come up with the themes for the programme? Is that stuff that you had noticed as a common theme in terms of contribution to why the offences are committed by your young females?
I think it was a mixture, really. So there were some things that, even like with the previous research that Abby was talking about, but also from personal experience. So the previous role I worked in, I was a service manager at a women's organisation, and I managed the under 25s. And that was an organisation working with girls who were sexually exploited and sex working and in and out of custody and things like that. Along with one of my other colleagues that also developed this. So together we had a really, really good understanding of actually the end goal, if we don't have some of these conversations earlier on, the impact that could have. So a lot of it was around that, but also just from working with the girls, what we felt was kind of missing, and having a psychology student as well, getting her input on what she thought would be appropriate as well. So it was a mix, really.
Okay, thank you. Valerie.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, Val.
Hiya. Mine was just a massive congratulations, Abby, because I know that we've had so many conversations of us pulling our hair out, how you're going to get started, and you've launched it. So I was just so happy, just sitting here smiling from ear to ear. You've done brilliantly. So I was going to say, yeah, well done to you both. And I'm glad that you've now started it, and hopefully it will go from strength to strength.
Oh, thank you, Val, and thank you for everything that I learned from you. I don't think we'd be where we are now if it wasn't for your support.
Oh, you're more than welcome. See you soon.
Thanks, Valerie. Harley.
Hi everyone. First of all, to just echo what Valerie said, it looks like a really positive program, and I just wondered how easy or challenging was it to kind of set up the group works and get going, and is group work something that you guys do regularly?
It's something that definitely we haven't done for a while. COVID, of course, being part of that, but also in Coventry, we've got some really challenging group dynamics, sort of postcode wars, and we went through a phase of very serious youth violence, so we had to stop group work at that point because we weren't sure what we were exposing children to. I think if we were just setting up a group by ourselves, it probably would have been easier because then you have control, don't you? So doing it with a group of colleagues had a massive amount of value, but was definitely more challenging. And we had quite a lot of pre-meets where we set exactly what we were going to do. So we went from sort of an ideas factory to meeting and sort of consolidating it as we went along. I think because we're open to learning what we've done well, but also what hasn't gone so well and what's not felt good for us and what's not felt good for our colleagues, having that open dialogue means it's been a lot easier. But yeah, not without its challenges.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sherelle.
Hi, good morning all, and well done, ladies. It sounds amazing. The project sounds great, and it sounds really current as well, which is good, because a lot girls groups that we've done previously, we are revisiting it now. I'm from Leicester Youth Justice Service, and it's about, well, when I was looking back at the folders, was revisiting stuff we'd done. It seems quite stale and old-fashioned and a little bit out of date. So it's good that you've noticing trends and things that are going to really kind of really be attractive to people to want to do it. It's all very well getting the referrals, but maintaining them and having them attend and it being effective work is the hard part. So well done, ladies. And what I wanted to ask was the referral process. So how do you identify? Is it just put out there to anyone who's female? Do the case managers discuss it with the young person during their sessions, and then or do you have a list? Can anyone refer into it? Or what's the referral process, and how do you identify whose needs this will meet, and who this will be good for, who it's aimed at?
We tried to be quite open with this, didn't we, T? So we had an open invitation to all of our case managers to put forward any girls that they thought were appropriate, and we had a referral form around that. Because of the postcode wars that I referred to earlier, we have to be really careful who we get together, so we need to have clear referrals and do quite a lot of cross-checking to make sure that everyone attending is safe. But we also opened it up to our partners, and we opened it up to girls that had been with us but were no longer with us, on the basis that, first of all, we wanted to get as many girls there as possible, but also you don't stop needing things just because you finish at Youth Justice. And we wanted to understand how we could use it, as I said, as sort of a longer term contingency planning and exit planning for girls, but also, could we bring girls open to youth justice together with girls not open to youth justice, and they're likely to have had some different experiences, so that opportunity to learn from each other was increased by doing that? What do you think, T?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the fact that we co-delivered it with the youth club allowed us to open it out, because actually, if we refer to the other groups that Abby was talking about, it is all in-house, and we make sure that there's extensive kind of checks within our own team. I think opening it out allowed us the young people to work with a mentoring service. So it is long-term support and linking them in with positive, constructive activities at the same time. So I think, had we have run the girls group completely by ourselves, we probably wouldn't have opened it out to other teams. But I think the fact that we did allowed us to do that. And the exploitation team as well, who we share an office with, they referred into it as well.
Did you did you allocate kind of, that was the different cohorts with different risk levels? So if you had some young people, some females that were high risk levels, would you put them with the females that were not in the youth justice system? Did you have kind of, or did you just merge?
Yeah, we didn't factor risk in as a significant. I mean, we looked at risk, but actually our main concerns were on the referral form. We had are there any people that they shouldn't come into contact with? You know, who were their main contacts? And we also had things like, is there anything else that we need to know? So gang affiliation, significant learning difficulties, dietary restrictions, you know, things that we would need to know running the group. But because we're not there talking about offending behaviour, we're there talking about what's important about being a young woman in today's society. Actually, we didn't feel that risk played a really significant part in that. So we were aware of the risk ratings of the CYJS girls that went on the programme, but it wasn't a significant priority for us. And I think that was the right approach, because I don't think that we had any conversations about risk as the group went through, and I don't anticipate that we'll have any after. Do you think?
No, and I think, again, sorry to keep bringing up the other groups, but I think it links back to that. So for the Black and Mixed Heritage Boys group that we've developed, that is specifically for, I hate to say high risk, but higher risk, medium to high risk individuals who do kind of miss out on a lot of the opportunities. And that is, therefore, we have weapon wanding at the sessions, we have police checks and everything like that. I think with the girls group, we don't have, Coventry still doesn't have a massive number of girls coming through. So to be able to separate, to have different cohorts and things like that, we wouldn't have a group, would we, Abby? So we've had to kind of, like Abby said, we're very much aware of risk and we take everything very seriously when it comes to that, but more in relation to, can they be around other young people or not, and rather than it being their rated risk on asset.
It's not a significant factor in your decision whether they come or not, which I think is a good idea, because it can kind of isolate some young people, and you might miss the opportunity to. And for some young people, the risk levels, let's say they're high risk safety and well-being, that might limit them. They just be put as high risk, but then it might be really beneficial. It might be really useful for them to meet these other young people and learn from them and have these opportunities, instead of kind of being put in a box of high risk. You can only do this and you can't associate with them, which I found we've done a few times here, where there's been a few times where I've had a young person, they can't go with that cohort because that person's got so many offences, and it's kind of looking beyond the risk levels and looking at the young person as the individual and not as just high, medium or low.
Yeah, exactly, Sherelle. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And one of the things that I learned from Val at Birmingham was the work with girls. One of the main differences in working with girls to working with boys is you're not talking about the what, you're talking about the why. So you're talking about the relationships, you're talking about the emotional aspects and the feelings. And actually, because we weren't talking about offending behaviour, risk wasn't really a significant factor. And when we did talk about relationships, it was about what's a healthy relationship, because we know a lot of the girls that we see in youth justice are there because they're hanging out with a particular group or because they've got a particular boyfriend. So that focus on sort of the emotional and the relational way of working was massively more important for us. So we had we knew that we wanted a maximum of 15 girls, because we wanted to get the girl to staff ratio right. And I think we ended up with, was it 8 in the end?
Yeah, we had 8.
Yeah.
It's a good number. It's a good number when you're dealing with those kind of girls. So you've answered one of the questions that was in the chat. Lynn, I'm going to give you the last question. And because my follow-up is it's been in the chat, but I was going to ask it anyway, in terms of the pack, whether we could share a copy of that, and I can see that being really useful for the resource hub. So I'll chat to you both about that afterwards. So Lynn, last question for you, and then we will move on to Cardiff.
Hi. Hi. We're just in the early stages of writing our girls group, and sort of writing out the sessions. Some of them that we found quite easy because they're quite sort of like concrete things about like exploitation, or and there's examples about it, about porn and things like that. We're really struggling about esteem, self-esteem, like how you teach a young person that who has never had that, and they don't really understand the concept and stuff. So I was just really, well, I'm just trying to poach ideas really as to how you broach that, and how you can, because it's like a feeling, isn't it, rather than sort of an example of things that you
Yeah.
can give. So yeah, any tips?
Well, within our 8-week program, we specifically put the self-esteem one last, because ideally they will do multiple different sessions, and it will all lead to that kind of building of self-esteem throughout, and confidence and self-understanding and things like that. But that last session, it starts off quite light, where you're understanding what self-esteem is, and how it can affect you, why it can change, and how you can improve it. Which, telling somebody this is how you can improve it doesn't improve it, but just helping a person understand, a girl understand how they can get to that place. And then using different like clips. So Zendaya does like top 10 self-love tips. So using examples and then getting them to say, oh, what would you how would you what would your top 3 self-love tips be to your friend or your sister, or to try and remove it from the self first. Then we do an activity where it's really good in a group. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but you sit in a circle. You can still do it one-to-one, but it's a little bit more awkward one-to-one, but you can do it in a group. Sit in a circle, and you have to say to the next person something that you really like about them. It could be something physical, it could be an attribute, it could be a characteristic, it could be intelligence, whatever. And that person is not allowed to say anything other than thank you. You have to smile, say thank you, and then just move on to the next. And I think it's a really uncomfortable task to begin with, but you walk away feeling amazing, because actually you've just listened to something nice about yourself and accepted it. Then we do things like being able to identify positive attributes about yourself. And we've got a worksheet that I created with all lots of positive words. So they're never going to say, oh, I'm this and I'm that. But when you give them a worksheet to say, highlight everything that you think you are, and you can have discussions around that. And then there's a couple more affirmations that we do and things like that. And then the last one is writing that letter to yourself. And I've created a template where you can either just fill in the gaps, or I've just created some nice borders where they can completely write their own letter. But I think the one with gaps, if you've got young people that are quite they're low in self-esteem and confidence, then that's a good one, because you're only finding the odd word to write in there. And it could be things, like, I want to have more confidence in myself. And it's just a really positive session. But as I said, we've tried to do it in an order that makes sense. So throughout, that confidence and self-esteem is being built throughout all of the sessions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you build it rather than teach it to a certain extent, don't you? I do love your up-to-date cultural references. I've had to Google some of them, but that just says more about me. And also thank you to Hannah, because she's put some links in the chat about some additional resources for building self-esteem. So there's some really useful links in the chat. So thank you to Hannah for popping those in there. Thank you so much, Tian and Abby, for that really inspirational presentation. I think you've given people lots and lots of food for thought, and hopefully kind of really sparked something for them to be taken away and thinking about. And thank you for your offer to be available for follow-up conversations as well. That is very much appreciated. So I think we're now moving to the joy of Teams is that we can be in Coventry 1 minute, and then we can be in Cardiff, and then shortly after that we're going to be in Sheffield. So Hannah and Laura, brilliant. Handing over to you guys so you can tell us what's happening in Cardiff.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tracy. And also thank you so much, ladies from Coventry. And just to say, before we kind of go into our presentation, we've used the document on the like top tips for working with girls when we were kind of developing. So, and it was really helpful. So yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, we are just going to talk a little bit today about sort of how we've been working with girls. Our groups also, we've kind of termed it girls group. So I am one of the intervention specialists in Cardiff, and we have like quite a small interventions team with a few different workers. So we carry out a lot of the interventions with the young people. And then over to Laura.
Yeah, and then I am a case manager on the prevention team.
So where we kind of started, myself and a couple of other colleagues first attended this forum last summer. I don't know if that was the first one, but that was the first one we attended. Which kind of gave us inspiration for starting specific sessions, interventions and activities with girls. We have quite, I think, again, similar to Coventry, we have definitely seen an increase in girls coming through the service, but previously the numbers, certainly after COVID, were a lot lower. So we did have specific like one-to-one interventions around certain topics that were kind of coming up as needs for the girls. But we didn't necessarily have sort of like a set program, and we didn't do any group work with girls. So through attending a forum, we kind of like were inspired from some of the things that we've been seeing. And we run each year a summer timetable for boys and girls. But what we did last year was we began to implement some activities targeted towards girls within the service. So we had conversations with some of the girls that were open to us at that time about things that they would enjoy to do. So there was just some photos at the bottom there. So they kind of mentioned doing some things with animals. So we took them to a farm. We also went to Brecon to do some alpaca walking, which was terrifying, but they did really enjoy it. And then, yeah, some sort of beauty activities there like nails. So we were trying to kind of, first of all, just target some specific activities, and then through having conversations around the needs and interests of the girls throughout those activities, we had a sort of, she's left the service now, but we had like an intervention lead who developed an initial 8-week program of interventions and activities. So we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about that and how it's developed.
So how it's run at the moment then, we have weekly sessions, like Hannah said, on an 8-week basis. So we have a different group of girls that attend for those 8 weeks. It's actually recently changed to a Monday, but that's just an example of one of our posters. So it's a Monday after school. We've got a variety of staff who help to deliver the sessions. So it includes case managers, interventions workers, speech and language therapists, substance misuse workers. We found this to be really helpful, as a lot of the girls who attend these sessions will go on to work with the speech and language or the substance misuse worker. So it kind of gives them that introduction, and they already know the person they're going to be working with in the future. Most of us are also CCAR trained, and we let all the girls know that at the start of the programme, just in case they want to have any of those conversations separate to the group. So we always have a minimum of 2 staff, and we transport the young people to the session. This helps us to have one-to-one conversations in the car on the way there, or especially afterwards. We found a lot of the girls will be very reflective about what we've just discussed or what's happened during the session. Sorry, 2 secs, the thing's over. How do I move it? There you go. Yeah, so the case managers are responsible for signing up the girls. And like I said, they'd stay then through the full 8 weeks. But we do have someone who oversees the whole programme. And if we're low on numbers for that cohort for any reason, he'll sort of look at what girls are open to YJS at the time, speak to the case manager directly and see if there's any way we can encourage that young person to join in the sessions.
So this is just a bit of an example of like a rota and a schedule for some of the things we cover. We don't necessarily have, we do have some set sessions, but we don't necessarily, originally the program that was developed had kind of 8 different topics, and there were kind of PowerPoints attached to each of that topic, which is kind of here, this first one. We kind of found that with the girls, the first girls that attended, it didn't really work in that kind of setup. They didn't like the PowerPoint. They felt like it was quite school-like. It was a bit harder to engage them. So we've kind of developed and changed it. So we amend the topics and kind of things that we cover depending on the cohort that we've got and the specific needs of the group. We've also added in, so where I've put these kind of like yellow is just to show like different things that we cover based on that cohort of girls. We've also added into every cohort that we have an introduction session where we do like little icebreakers, some games, the girls get to know each other a bit, and they can choose specific topics or activities that they would like to do, just to kind of make them feel that they're being listened to and to encourage them to want to keep attending.
So we're just going to go through some session examples then. So for one of our cohort, a big focus was positive friendships and trying to identify friendships in their own life that were healthy or unhealthy, because they were having a lot of difficulties with their current friends. So this exercise just looked on different areas of what they valued in a friendship and what would be good traits of a good friend. We did have really good feedback about this session actually, and they sort of went back and reflected on their friendship groups, and both girls went and made new friendship groups who they're still friends with now, and they're a lot more positive, and neither girls come back through to YJS. So I think it was definitely needed to identify some positive and healthy friendships.
And then this is more of a recent session that we've introduced, but it's gone down really well. And this kind of came from some of those initial discussions in one of the introduction sessions. So this session is kind of, we've termed it like being a girl in today's world. So it focuses on the girls' perceptions of how they find being female in today's society, which can kind of like validate some of their feelings around it and their frustrations, but also recognizing and highlighting their strengths and things that they kind of find empowering or enjoy about being a girl. So we start the session off, I don't know how many people have seen the Barbie movie, but there's an amazing kind of like 2-minute speech in there, where she kind of talks about all the like conflicting things, like you have to be this, but you also have to be this. It's amazing. I can send the link because they love watching that at the start. It's kind of a really good hook. And then we have a discussion about that, and we have sort of a group discussion about positives and things that girls enjoy, and then things that they find hard or maybe unfair. And then what we do, I always bring loads of magazines to the session and they create a collage. So these are just a couple of examples. Some of them prefer to do it individually, some of them do it as kind of pairs. But they love it, and I found it really nice. Like magazines, I feel like no one really reads magazines anymore, and the girls were all they're like, oh, we don't really like look at magazines. So it was really nice for them to be able to actually like physically flick through and kind of pull out things that they felt were relevant to them. But yeah, that session's really nice, and that's a more recent one that we've done with them.
So this is an example of something we did when we were looking at identity and sort of like self-worth and self-confidence. So we split it in half of what we think people view us as and who we view ourselves as. And then we had some really good discussions about, you know, whose opinions really matter, how those labels that other people give us can affect us, and maybe trying to reverse those labels a little bit. So we had one, I think it was the annoying to bubbly one. Like some people may view her as annoying, she was saying, because she's always so energetic and chatty. And we were saying, you know, but that's a really positive thing. And that's good because you're really bubbly. So people would like you in that sense. So just trying to get them to reframe some of those negative values and beliefs that they might have about themselves as well. This was one of our healthy relationships and boundaries one as well. So for a lot of our sessions, we kind of do the baseline and its introductions into these topics, and then the case managers will follow up with that more intensive support around the issue. So we did a little relationships flags one. So they basically just had to colour it in whether they thought it was a green flag or a red flag in a relationship. And as you can see, there's a few half and halves. But that really promoted some good conversations about whether or not that is a positive thing, especially with the calling all the time, wanting to spend all their time with you. A lot of the girls thought that was like a positive thing, and like, yes, your boyfriend should want to. So we sort of stripped it back and was like, okay, well, what if they weren't allowing you to see your family and your friends? And yeah, just had a really good conversation about what is healthy and unhealthy in a relationship.
I think we found specifically with our most recent cohort as well, boundaries has been quite a big issue for a lot of the girls we've been working with, and they might know something's not right or it doesn't feel right, but they don't know how to go about addressing that. So we've had quite a lot of, again, like some of that work is done one-to-one if we feel that that needs kind of pushing a bit further, but it's quite nice to have the initial group discussion just to get them thinking about it, and then we can identify then who might need kind of further work on that. This is another more recent one. So we did a session on promoting positive mental health because some of the girls that were attending had quite a lot of anxiety. So we had a general chat about what mental health meant to the girls and what they felt might affect it, what might help with it, what might make it kind of worse. And then the activity that we did. So we'll go into the activities a bit more, but we always have like a topic and then we have an activity that goes alongside it. We made journals. We just got loads of stickers and we got these little jars also and some post-it notes, and they could put on the post-it notes different things that would help them when they were feeling down. So we did give them some prompts, but they actually were great. They came up with loads of ideas on their own. So then from the session, they could take home a journal each, and we talked about how different ways they could use the journal. Then they had these little like positivity pots, and yeah, they seem to really enjoy that. And we also we have had girls in previous cohorts that have had quite specific needs around mental health, so they kind of have further one-to-one support. But we also in this session kind of just had a chat with the girls about different services that are available if they are struggling, people they can have the conversations with, just to make sure that they feel kind of supported and know where to go outside of the sessions as well. And then these are just some examples of the activities we've done alongside the topics. We always have pizza. In our last session, we have like an end of group celebration. We've done sort of cake and biscuit decorating, some Christmas themed baking because one of our groups fell sort of across the Christmas period.
Yeah, and then bracelet making. This tends to be quite an early on activity that we do, and the girls absolutely love it. The last cohort we had asked to do it about 3 more times after this. Mindfulness colouring as well is a really nice one. Candle making. And yeah, at the end, we often ask them to like create a poster that we can maybe put up to encourage other girls to come to the sessions.
So yeah, a bit of a variety really. Again, we don't necessarily stick to exactly the same activities. Some have worked better than others. It's definitely been trial and error. The candles were a disaster when I did them, but it's just trying to kind of take on board their feedback and yeah, just keep coming up with new ideas, which we're kind of in the process of doing at the moment.
Okay, and then this is some feedback that we've had then. So the top is sort of ideas that the young people in our recent cohort shared, just their feedback, how they felt about the sessions. So we had some really good feedback about the staff. You know, sort of saying that they were a bit unsure at first. They didn't really want to join the group, but they're really glad that they did. They wanted to stay. It made their mental health better. It helped with anxiety. And then we've got some parent feedback underneath from one of ours back last year. And the other two, yeah, these are also from some of the girls who attended last year. So the first girl really struggled with her mental health and did end up accessing support from our mental health worker as well, from some of the conversations that we had in girls group, and we identified that she would benefit from that further support. And then HMI underneath hers was the one where we really focused on friendships, because that's what sort of led her to come into contact with YJS, was being in a very negative peer group. But yeah, she's found more positive friends now. She's doing really well. Like I said, she hasn't come back through. She's starting college with this new friendship group. So yeah, it's all been really positive.
So our initial, for our first 2 cohorts, we kind of had, this was the way that we collected feedback. So we just had verbal, in our last sessions with the girls, we took down kind of verbal notes of what they'd reported, parent sort of texts and stuff. But we've adapted that now so that we can identify sort of more specific areas for feedback. So now each girl at the end in our last session will complete a brief feedback form with lots of different kind of questions about different parts, and they can expand and rate kind of how they found different aspects. I've tried to include most in here, but it wouldn't all fit in the PowerPoint. But as in, so like I feel that people who saw me at the group listened to me. It was easy to talk to the people who saw me. I feel people here know how to help me. And then there's just some kind of like general comments there. And this has made it easier for us to identify things. Like a lot of them have said they don't find the room that comfy, which I would totally agree with, because we kind of do it in our intervention room, but we're trying to work on things like that. So yeah, it just helps us identify like ways of moving forward kind of specifically, but we've had some lush feedback, and yeah, it's been really helpful in kind of how we move forward. Is this one you? I've forgotten. No. Oh, track and progress. Sorry. So track and progress, because that's another thing that we are quite mindful of. And I think this is from one of the previous one of these meetings that I attended. Someone raised the kind of issue of how do we track it. So we've started, what we do at the beginning with the girls is we kind of do this My Journey All About Me star. So they rate at the beginning where they are, and then they do that again at the end kind of individually. And it just helps us identify initially any helpful topic areas to be addressed. So we've had quite a few. There's the I feel confident that had that quite low at the start. So that helps us kind of tailor the sessions to make sure we're doing some work around like self-esteem. And then we can come again at the end to see how that's improved. And then we've got an intervention coordinator now who creates a report at the end of each cohort, which kind of identifies topics covered, feedback given, and any findings for future developments. And then previous attendees, I've created like a tracking document on Excel to highlight whether they've returned to the service. And then if that occurs, we'll try to understand the reasons for that to see if we've kind of got gaps in the group. So this is just a bit of, I know we're probably going over a bit over time, but this is just a bit of an idea about numbers, because we struggled at the start, to be honest. And this was, again, from one of these groups. I would just remember someone saying, even if you've only got 2 girls, like keep going, like just keep going with it. And so we did only have 2 girls we've done 4 cohorts now. We've just finished the 4th one. So the first 2 only had 2 girls attend. Again, our numbers were pretty low at the time with females in the service, and it is this program is voluntary for them to do. And it was kind of at the start. So we had 2 girls attend for the first one. The last 2 cohorts, we've had 4 girls. And for the next one that we're due to start in October, we should have 6, which is, I think we've set as our kind of maximum number. We'd probably go up to 7. But just to keep it kind of like that relatively small group to encourage those kind of relationships. But yeah, it's definitely increasing, and we've had a lot more interest. Case managers are a lot more on board now, and the service in general is more aware of what we're doing and has seen a lot of the work we've done. So again, there's just a few kind of, so basically we've had 12 girls attend so far. Only one of them has reoffended, and that is kind of, she's got a lot kind of going on. She's had a lot of placement moves, and she's in a new relationship, which is not healthy. So she's having sort of more one-to-one work done with her case manager as a result of that. But yeah, the other 11 girls, a couple of them are still open to us from our most recent cohort, but they're due to end soon. And the other girls that have attended have not come back through the service, which is really positive.
So just a couple barriers that we've had then, and how we've tried to overcome these. So yeah, like Hannah said, initially we did have low numbers, but you know, it was a teething process. We were just working through it and seeing how we could advertise better and how we can sort of speak to the case managers and try to identify any girls who've come into service. And yeah, now we're looking at 6 for our next, which is really good. We've hit the maximum. Engagement was sometimes a little bit limited in the initial cohort, but that we sort of did a reflection with those young people, and it was identified that the PowerPoints made them feel like it was too much like school, and it kind of got them off to a bad start, and they preferred having things more conversation based. So that's why a lot of the work we do now will have like resources that we bring to the session that we might ask them to fill in or do with them, but a lot of the work we do is just conversation based. Some issues between the girls attending and age differences. So we do risk assessments prior to them attending and ensure there's no known conflicts between the girls. We have had it before where they've been co-defendants. So we've made sure to put them on separate groups. And we've also had one where the 2 girls fell out during the 8 weeks, which did affect the attendance. But you know, on the flip side, we've also had it where we've been able to rebuild their relationship or form new friendships. So it's just about being attuned to the issues and making sure we're having the conversations with the girls on a week-to-week basis about why attendance might drop and, you know, what we can do to help bring it back up. And then filling the space after girls group ends. So a lot of the girls will say that they miss the weekly sessions and having that sort of like group activity or someone additional to talk to. Some of our young people might have like a male worker and they miss having that space where they can talk to a female worker. So those of us who are in girls group are always liaising with the case managers to see how we can fill that gap after they leave, if there's any further work they can do. Like some of them have worked with Hannah before or after the sessions, doing interventions. So yeah, we're going to start supporting with the exit plans and linking in with community groups and projects to see what they can attend once they finish our sessions. Oh, and we've also got some girls who, hold on, I'm on the next slide. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. If it's not, just add it on at the end. I think it is.
Yeah. So yeah, just briefly, there's only a couple of slides left. So ideas for kind of future developments. We are in the process of a development of a working group to look at research and good practice with girls to sort of inform our work within the service. This is kind of as well tailored to any additional sessions that might be needed to be done after girls group, because girls group is kind of like, our aim of that was to have like an informal, like fun space for the girls to kind of promote those social relationships and do some fun activities, and it's kind of, you know, been quite good at encouraging them to come back. But we're aware that, you know, some of the topics need to be, you know, done more intensively with a lot of the girls we've got. So yeah, we're kind of looking at different interventions that can be developed for maybe more of that one-to-one work. And then something that some of the girls from the previous cohorts have asked is if they can come back and support with some sessions of new cohorts, which we loved that idea. Where appropriate, obviously, but we've had some really, really good girls who are doing really well now, and they've said that they might like to kind of, for certain topics, come and help deliver it, which we thought was lovely. So we are looking at potentially doing that for the next cohort. Some sessions or activities to take place externally, because all of our girls group, other than the kind of summer activities that we've done with the girls, they've all been based at our office. Just because of the timing of it, because it's after school and college, and when we help transport, it just makes that easier. But we would like to try and make some of the sessions external, so maybe like take them out for a picnic, do some photography. There's a little pottery place not far from us, which we've just recently discovered. So we're going to try and take them out for some of those sessions just to give them a change of scene. And then, yeah, like I think Laura touched on it, researching into local community groups and projects for females to explore with the girls when they have completed the group. We work quite closely with an organisation called Sidestep, which kind of looks at exploitation, and some of that definitely is an issue for some of our girls. So we're looking at trying to introduce maybe some of those workers to come and sit in for a couple of the sessions, just so that they can explain what their service is, and the girls are aware that there's other kind of connections that they can continue after girls group. And then just the last slide. So we thought it'd just be helpful to just sum up what we feel has been most important throughout working with girls. Again, some of this we definitely, the Coventry tips we looked at when we were kind of developing things. I think consistent faces, so seeing the same staff regularly through the sessions helps build the relationships, which has been really important in getting them to attend. We tend to have the same 5 or 6 staff running all the sessions on like a rotation, so they get very familiar with, and also it's nice if someone's upstairs, even if they're not on that session, they'll pop down and say hello or help with the transport, which is really nice. Enthusiasm. I remember a few of the girls have said to me in like the first session, like, oh, no one's that happy, or, you know, blah, blah. They're a bit skeptical at first, but I think once that trust is established, the positivity can like rub off on them and help them enjoy sessions. We've had some come at the start, you know, their face says it all and they don't want to be there, and they're, you know, they feel like they've been kind of like, oh, we don't want to be here. But we do think we definitely see such a difference over the 8 weeks, and by the end they're like, oh, we don't want to leave. So yeah, I think enthusiasm is kind of massive. Snacks always help, especially if they arrive hungry or thirsty. It can help kind of settle them into the session. We always have like sweet squash, then obviously we do the pizza on the last session. And then we had some feedback from our speech and language therapist. She said that it helps her to identify any potential learning or communication needs during the activities, which can help her kind of make suggestions to us, but it also helps her identify if that individual might benefit from some further work with her.
Yeah, giving them a point of contact outside of the sessions then. Some of the girls have fed back that they quite like that it's separate to their sort of one-to-one work that they do with their case manager, and they've got other people to talk to. Learning skills. So we find the cooking activity always goes down really well. And a lot of the girls have then followed up and said that they've recreated that at home for their family. The mindfulness of being able to sort of practice that. We think it's really important the first session involving them and going through the plans. That's something all of the staff have fed back on, because it really helps us to just be, you know, child-led and make sure that we're getting their opinions and views, and they're included in that timetable. Then they engage better in those activities and sessions. And yeah, having the option to have a one-to-one chat in the session if needed. We've got various other rooms in our office. And we always say to the girls at the start, you know, there is the opportunity for one-to-one chats in one of the side rooms if you need it. You know, sometimes they'll make an excuse and be like, oh, can I go and make a cup of tea? And one of us will follow them in, and we sort of know that that's to have a little one-to-one chat by themselves.
And there's been quite a few safeguarding forms and things that we've submitted from those conversations. So we just feel like in general, the group has really helped to make sure that we are safeguarding the girls as best we can, and potentially those conversations might not have been had if the space wasn't there. So yeah, I feel like we've taken up enough time now. So thank you so much for listening. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, we're happy to try and answer them.
So thank you so much, Hannah and Laura. Really, again, inspiring presentation. We won't have time for questions, I'm afraid, but I am going to read out a comment from the chat, which is from Valerie, which just says, brilliant, every girl matters, whether it's 1 or 10, well done to you both in driving this forward. So I really think that kind of captures the message I would want to say as well, in terms of it will build, keep going. Those numbers tell their own story, really, don't they, in terms of you started with small numbers, but it's really built and built. And some really creative engagement skills and tools that you're using with those girls. So, and your enthusiasm comes through loud and clear is the other. So I can see how the girls are responding to that in the group. So thank you so very much for that.
Thank you.
I think if people want to contact you directly, I can put your contact details in what I've sent out afterwards. And you will always, and I'm assuming you're going to be sending me the slides, and I'll send those out in a bundle with other people as well. So really, thank you very much indeed. I have, as I always do, overrun. So we're running slightly late. But there may not be time for roundtable hints and tips, but I would ask you to think about who wants to volunteer to have a session at the next session, so that you can let me know at the end of that. So I'm going to hand over to Gilly now, who's going to be talking about the research that she's been doing, women and girls in conflict with the law. I am driving Gilly's slides, so good luck to me. I'm sure I'll be able to do it.
Thanks very much, Tracy. I'm not sure how much time I've got, but please tell me to stop when you need to. I feel very much at these kind of fora that I'm very much speaking to the converted in terms of your clear enthusiasm and expertise in relation to working with young women. But I want to focus today on the context and the background experiences of girls, kind of how they got to be with you in the first place in terms of criminalisation. So just on the first slide, please, Tracy, in terms of young women's backgrounds, as I'm sure you know, a very high proportion of girls in the justice system have experiences of maltreatment, both within and beyond the family, and also of exclusion and indeed inaction from state mainstream services. One of the things that really comes across from youth justice kind of personnel and talks is that you are often doing things which haven't gone before, which girls haven't had the opportunity to experience. And a big question is, why not? Why have they not been helped or recognised by mainstream services previously? So there are high rates of various forms of loss, of exclusion, of disruption in terms of relationships, place of residence, service provision, and instability in relation to, again, place of residence and workers and agencies that people are involved in. Largely as a consequence of all of this, trauma is prevalent, and it may, of course, manifest itself in depression, self-injury, or less dramatically in low self-esteem, and in various means of trying to cope with the circumstances that have been forced upon these young women. I should also add that young women and girls in the justice system are overwhelmingly affected by poverty, structural inequality, and the effects of austerity and the cost of living crisis. So going on to the next slide, my colleague at Lancaster, Claire Fitzpatrick, and her team have been doing a lot of work recently on the relationship between care experience and criminalisation and custody amongst young women. So it's long been known that there's a very significant overlap between girls' involvement in social care and criminal justice systems. This relationship is stronger than amongst boys, and particularly pronounced amongst young women in penal custody. So experiences of the care system seems to constitute a very significant and gendered pathway into the criminal justice system. So I kind of ask you to think about why this is. What are the mechanisms underlying this relationship between care, being looked after, crime and criminalisation? So there are personal aspects to do with trauma, feelings of rejection, and not really feeling cared about or mattering to other people, absence of trust, changes of caregiver and placement. But it's also often structural, to do with the nature of support offered or very often not offered or abruptly terminated by services. And girls offending can also be understood sometimes as a cry for help, a need for attention, in the context of that being lacking elsewhere. So moving on, as well as this research in the relationship between care and criminalisation, there is also increasing evidence of a relationship between school experiences and criminalisation. So going on to the next slide, what the Americans have often referred to as a kind of school to prison pipeline, which has tended to be conceptualised in relation to boys of colour particularly, and the disciplinary punishment they experience in various fora, particularly originating from school. So education is often seen as a problem of and for boys in this country, but arguably there are quite different experiences of girls which may lead to their criminalisation. So as I'm sure you know, children with a history of criminalisation are at far greater risk of school exclusion. The relationship goes in both directions. So about 71% of criminalised children, compared with only 15% of the general population, have been temporarily or permanently excluded from school. For girls, school exclusion, whether that be formal or informal, is often experienced as yet another rejection. They feel judged, they may judge themselves as not being worth it, as lacking value, and that can have an enduring impact on self-concept. My research with girls, and I'm doing research with young adult women in prison currently, is that negative experiences of school and of teachers are very often personalised. They see it as their fault, they blame themselves. Interactions with teachers are seen in very similar ways to interactions with social workers and other professionals. Moving on again, this interlinked continuum of punishment towards people at school and in the justice system has kind of gendered inflections, if you like. Often it's less about push out for girls and more about drop out. So the girls that I talk about very much being nobody noticed. I was sitting in class crying, I had a black eye, my hair was all over the place, I didn't turn up, and yet nothing happened, there was no response. They feel like they don't matter. So rather than just looking at the behaviour, we need to think about what was behind it. And obviously there is a push towards schools taking more account of young people's welfare. So girls' experience of trauma, of victimisation at home and outside is very significant in terms of their behaviour at school, their non-attendance at school, and potentially their disciplinary punishment at school. So moving on again, sorry, I'm dashing through really quickly. There seems to be something of a triangular relationship for criminalised girls between the law, conflict with the justice system, problems at school, whether that again be formal or informal exclusion, and care experience. So what's going on here? Why is it that girls with very disadvantaged and adverse backgrounds are being punished and not well served by these various formal institutions? A notable finding of the UK government Timpson review of school exclusions, for example, was that girls supported by social care, girls considered to be in need or looked after, were very significantly more likely than other girls to experience exclusion from school, and more so than boys. Why are we punishing young women who have not been able to be looked after at home? What we also need to consider, of course, is class and race-based stereotypes, which intersect with gender in terms of how girls might be perceived, judged or ignored in the care context and also in the school context. So white middle-class norms of docility, passivity, niceness, neat appearance even, might be invoked to punish girls who infringe these gender norms. So I guess, I mean, this speaks to some of the work that people are doing around positive identity, self-esteem. We really need to recognise that young women have been failed, that they have experienced inaction by the state in ways that affect their behaviour, affect their emotions, and affect their trust of professionals later on. It does seem to be a strong factor in routes from criminalisation, from victimisation to criminalisation. The kind of experience of unresolved trauma, of anger, of feeling like they don't matter. Criminalised young women, and Gender Alliance's research does this extremely well. They describe being disbelieved and judged negatively across a range of institutions as lacking value and seen only as troublemakers. So this can create an experience or a belief that people don't care about them, that there is indifference. Clearly the work you're doing counters this, but it's very important that this is not seen as only the criminal justice system responds to me, because obviously that has kind of quite big implications. So these historical experiences of professionals, of adults, can create a lack of trust and recalcitrance in interactions with criminal justice and other professionals later on. They can also impede compliance. So just recognising this kind of stuff, these previous experiences, is very, very important. So I'm going to just skip over it, if you don't mind, Tracy, to where we're talking about stigma, because I haven't got very much time left. And you will get the slides later on as well. That's it. So one of the big differences, I think, and this is particularly to do with my research with young adults more recently, looking back, is we need to remember whatever good we can do in the justice system, the reality of a criminal record is very stigmatizing. Women judge themselves, girls judge themselves to a greater extent very often than men and boys do, and there are cultural stereotypes which see women's offending as particularly egregious. Law-breaking rarely confers positive status, you know, being a lovable rogue or boys will be boys kind of stuff. That there is no equivalent for young women. And as they grow up, whilst men's offending past can sometimes be what Maruna refers to as rebiographed, seen as this has made me who I am. For women, revealing your criminal past is a risky business. It kind of risks substantial reputational damage. So we need to be aware of the stigma of crime, of criminalisation, and the ways it interacts often with things like care stigma, with gendered stigma, with stigma to do with being a young mother or a substance abuser or whatever it might be. And this affects young women's interactions, of course. This stigma may be exacerbated by very small numbers of girls in the justice system, albeit perhaps growing slightly at the moment, and their hyper-visibility in court. They are seen as out of place and therefore they must be somehow worse. So the kind of cultural narratives that we experience about young women and about women's offending are also important to bear in mind. And I think this speaks to the idea of the Coventry model of doing stuff jointly with youth services in the community that aren't criminal justice is extremely important. Provision that can continue beyond and outside the justice system, which does not stigmatise, is really valuable, I think. So in terms of going on again, in terms of relationships with staff, young women I've talked to about who do they want to work with them, and again you know this better than your colleagues who aren't at this kind of forum. The shared positionality of workers is quite important, whether that be, it's not always gender, it's sometimes social class, it's sometimes ethnicity, but girls want to be seen and to be understood, to have workers and professionals who understand where they come from, basically. So there's a need for this understanding, and peer mentoring works quite well here as well. But also there is a big need for staff support and supervision. It's demanding work and emotionally difficult sometimes. That girls want to be seen and heard can take persistence. It might take a long time in the context of breach of trust in the past. One thing that's come up from my own research and that of a couple of colleagues is case files. Young women often talk about what's been written down about them and the kind of words in case files taking on a kind of life of their own, then being talked about as bad kids and assessed in ways that they are not happy with. So the potential for co-writing assessments and case files is something that's perhaps worth thinking about. Young women talk about or refer to worker credibility, legitimacy, and genuineness. They want people who care about them, who see them as people, and who also recognise the injustices they've experienced in the past. The idea of narrative role models, mentors, people with lived experience who have faced similar obstacles is quite a challenge for women because, as I just said, the stigma of a criminal record makes it more difficult for some to, talk about their past and to work in this kind of setting. But it's worth thinking about in terms of your interventions with young people. So in terms of what I want you to think about today is, while working with young women and doing positive work is really important, we need to keep in mind the structural inequalities and the injustices that underlie girls' behaviour that often lead them into the justice system in the first place, rather than focusing on their crimes in the absence of this kind of context. So there are interconnections and similarities between girls' experiences of various state institutions, and it makes sense for them to be quite recalcitrant and difficult in settings that are not attuned to their needs. So we need to be patient, persistent, and kind. Work with young women and with professionals has often found that girls are considered to be manipulative, to be liars, to be particularly difficult. Some of this behaviour needs to be understood in their, they need to be like that perhaps in order to navigate the systems that they found themselves in. So we need to think about stigma as an additional form of punishment. I think personally that stigma is punishment. The fact that it exists constitutes additional punishment for young women who've often been not involved to a great extent in the justice system. And we also need to think very carefully about education, both in terms of the adversities that girls have experienced within school, the push out, the dropout, but also in terms of a pathway out of crime and a means of fostering hope, independence, financial independence in the future. One or two things actually I want to kind of leave with you at the end is, one, that we need to think about criminal records. Young women often don't understand the impacts of their criminal records on their futures. So a bit of education perhaps within your groups about criminal records disclosure requirements, to guard against people just telling everyone just in case they need to, which is not in their interests. And support with how to talk about criminal records, if indeed you do need to, is really useful, I think, going forward. Another thing I would ask individual youth justice services to do is to keep really detailed data on these increases and the types of offences that girls have been arrested or charged with. So a particular bugbear of mine is things like violence is quite a broad concept. What exactly is involved in the types of offences or convictions the girls have received? What have they been? What is the context? So keeping data on what actually has happened, how the police are dealing with things, I think is really important, because context is very, very crucial in girls offending. So I've whizzed through this because I'm aware of time, but there are quite a lot of references attached to my slides, and do get in touch personally if you would like any further kind of references for further reading. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you, Gillian. Sorry to have rushed you at the to have that as rushed, but I really think it's important. It's going to kill my phone. To kind of remind ourselves of the societal and social context of how children find themselves in, girls find themselves in the criminal justice system, and that interrelationship between, I mean, we hear so much about the interrelationship between education and missing education and entering that criminal justice system, but that extra layer that seems to be so important for girls in terms of their care experience as well, and girls entering the criminal justice through care experience. So yeah, really thank you for that. It's really useful to have that reminder of context and trauma and those things that matter for girls. And just my reflection is that the services are doing such amazing work with the girls when they get hold of them, and it's such a shame that they're having to enter the criminal justice systems in order to access those amazing services. So we're out of time, I'm afraid. I think one of my reflections is I need to give more time to this meeting moving forward. So unless anyone tells me otherwise, I'll go for 2 hours next time, because I think we would have really benefited for having more conversation about both Gilly's presentation and from Cardiff and Coventry as well. So my apologies for that.